Hello everyone, my name is Mitchell. Welcome to this edition of Facebook Live. We're doing a Greek edition today. My name is Mitchell. I'm the Greek specialist here at Memoria Press. I'm joined by Ali, who's helping us produce this thing, and Jordan, who's doing pyrotechnics and that kind of stuff. But we're here today to answer all of your Greek questions. There's some questions have already been posted, some questions are yet to come. But if you do have a question, feel free to comment below. We're going to be looking at that. We're going to be monitoring that. We're going to get to those questions. I do have some frequently asked questions that we'll go through as well. We'll start with some questions that were posted ahead of time. But remember, if you do have a question or anything that we're talking about, feel free to post in the bottom, and we'll get to those as they come up. All right. Well, our first question that was posted beforehand was this. How do we help our children keep all of these foreign languages straight and prevent them from getting mixed up or confused? You know, for example, this mom says, my kids are learning Latin and I would like to teach them the Greek alphabet, but I don't want to confuse them. Well, this is somewhat of a common question. So let me talk a little bit about where this question comes from, and then I'll talk about how it applies to what we're doing here. This question kind of comes from multilingual environments where the goal is for young children to be immersed and to learn language habits. The language habits usually manifest themselves in the 4 skills of language. So that's reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And so the fear is that as students are absorbing these multiple languages in these multilingual environments, they're not able to develop communicative competence. They're not able to be competent enough to communicate in these languages. But actually what this ends up being is a little bit of a mythical fear, because no research has demonstrated that the children who grow up in these linguistic environments are confused at all. Now that's in those environments, but actually as we teach in a classical education, Greek and Latin, we're actually teaching something very different. The goal of teaching Greek and Latin is not to teach them communicative competence necessarily. We're not trying to teach them to converse in Greek and Latin. We're trying to teach them grammatical competence. Greek and Latin become kind of the time-tested vehicles for teaching grammar. And so as a result, this fear that is kind of revolved around this other world, really in our education environment, we don't have to worry about that too much, because because the outcome is different. We're not trying to teach them to be conversant. We're trying to teach them grammar. All right. Well, some of you are joining us. Again, I just want to tell you who I am. My name is Mitchell. I'm the Greek specialist here at Memoria Press. We're walking through some of the questions that you might have. Another question that someone posted ahead of time is, my 6th grader is learning Elementary Greek Level 2. It's one of our curriculum books, and she's learning that alongside of 3rd form Latin. And so the question is, as they go into their 7th grade year, should they continue to Elementary Greek Level 3, or should they go right into our 1st form Greek? So this is a good question. We kind of have 2 paths of Greek, right? So there's the Elementary Greek series 1, 2, and 3, which is kind of geared towards younger students. And then we have the 1st form series, which eventually will be a full form, 1st form, 2nd form, 3rd form Greek. Right now we only have 1st form. But for a 7th grader, what we'd recommend is going right into 1st form Greek. The reason why is because the Elementary Greek series is really geared towards a slightly younger audience. And then once you've done at least 2nd form Latin, students have enough grammatical background in a language that's similar to Greek, like Latin, where they can jump right into 1st form and not have any issues at all. There's only one thing that you might consider. 3rd form Latin does have a reputation for being kind of difficult. So maybe if you're doing 3rd form Latin and 1st form Greek in the same year, that can be a little bit difficult. It depends on the students. There's a couple options there. You could kind of go through 1st form Greek slower and kind of go into the summer a little bit. You could also take 2 years to do it. But that's something for you to think about depending on your particular situation. And now we have our first Greek question that was posted beforehand, Greek specific. How important are the accent marks? Well, great question. I think that the accent, it kind of varies. It's not important to teach your students all of the complicated rules for accentuation. In Greek, they're actually quite complicated. And it wasn't until many years of studying Greek myself that I actually got those rules and kind of internalized them myself. But what you should do is, as you're learning Greek vocabulary, be sure you learn how words are accented in your vocabulary list, or try your best to. As you're first studying Greek, it won't be as much of an issue, but for example, the article in Greek and the relative pronoun in Greek and one or two conjunctions all could look exactly the same, and the only thing that separates them are the accents. So certainly if you don't memorize the accents in first form, you're not going to be at a huge loss. But it is important, especially as students get further and further along in Greek, to memorize those accents as you're learning your new vocab. Some of you are still coming in. I just want to introduce you to what we're doing here. This is our Greek edition of Facebook Live. My name is Mitchell. If you have any questions, feel free to comment, and we'll get to those right away. Then our last question that was posted beforehand is this. I'm planning to start Greek with my 8th grader next school year. Other than learning the alphabet before that, what should I do or what should I know before I start? And then the comment is, I have no knowledge of Greek. Well, I'm certainly sympathetic to your situation. I guess I would say this. For you as a parent who's looking to teach your kids, mastery over the alphabet is going to be really helpful. It's going to help you teach them to kind of lead them as they're learning pronunciation. It's going to give you your own sense of competence as you are helping them with forms and things that could be complicated. But another thing you should probably do is begin to learn the grammar ahead of your student. Ideally, you're working through the first form series with your students. You're learning the Greek forms with them. You're able to walk them through. That's why there's a great teacher manual that's included. So, for you as the parent to be able to understand maybe even some slightly advanced information. So working through that ahead of time, being familiar with it, reading it, 1 or 2 weeks ahead before your student gets there, that's really going to equip you to see where the student needs to be and then help get them there. So in other words, read ahead, try to internalize that yourself, definitely master the alphabet, and that's going to really help you as you're looking to teach your student. Okay, I'm going to send it over to Allie. Allie, you have a question for us.
Do we have a rough idea of when second form Greek will be available?
This is a great question. It's one that I'm currently working on right now. My hope is that in 2019, we'll have everything ready. Obviously, there's some testing and things. I don't want to say too much more than that. Otherwise, secrets, you have to keep them close. But our goal is this year to have it done. All right, we're going to go on to our frequently asked questions. One question that I get frequently is, do we teach, quote, biblical Greek? So I'm going to add some texture to the background of this question. If you look at English, you can study English in kind of 3 segments. You can study Old English, like Beowulf or something in its original. You could study Middle English. So that'd be like Chaucer's Canterbury Tales in Middle English. And then you could study Modern English. That would be, the King James Bible or Shakespeare, or what we currently know right now. So you can kind of take English as a whole and see that there's kind of 3 epochs, and during each 3 of those segments, the language is a little bit different. Someone who speaks modern English might be able to recognize some or part of what they do in Middle English, but Old English would be kind of 2 steps removed. We can kind of think of Greek in the same way. There's kind of different epochs. There's Ancient Greek. That'd be kind of the dialects and Homer, kind of pre-city-state Greek. And then there's Classical Greek. That's, your Athens, your literature in Athens, your Attic Greek, your Ionic, your Doric. And then after that, you have the Hellenistic period. That's around Alexander the Great, when Alexander took Greek throughout the whole world, and syntax and vocabulary is being introduced and changed. That period, that Hellenistic period, really from Alexander the Great till about really 300 BC to about 300 AD, you have what's called Hellenistic Greek. That is primarily what we're teaching. We're teaching the literature surrounding, for example, the New Testament, or Xenophon, or Plutarch. Even some of the stuff that's written about Alexander the Great can be read. So another name for Hellenistic Greek is Koine Greek. Koine Greek just stands for the common Greek. Koine is the Greek word for common. The reason why it's common is because Alexander the Great took it everywhere, and so it became the common language of the time. So our grammar really focuses on that. So the word biblical Greek doesn't quite get at the heart of what we're teaching. It's more that Hellenistic Greek that we're focusing on, which kind of equips students for studying Greek in general. All right, question number 2 is in terms of our frequently asked questions. What about classical Greek? Should we start with classical Greek or Koine Greek? Well, this is a bit of a debate. And ultimately, there's pros and cons to starting with either one. So it really just depends on what your long-term goals are. And so if your long-term goals are purely to study grammar and to be conversant in absorbing a grammatical competence from the mere study of language, then really both of these would be a benefit to you. If a secondary goal is also to prepare to read text around the Hellenistic period, so for example, the New Testament or Xenophon or literature of that period, obviously starting in the classical Greek, starting to learn classical Greek is probably not, your best bet. If you're looking to read classical literature, starting in classical could be fine as well. There's just pros and cons to both. Some things you have to think about in terms of your long-term goals. Also, I'll just say that it's hard to find classical Greek grammars written for young students that really focus on the grammar forms. I know that there are some out there, but they can be definitely hard, especially for someone who doesn't know the language, is not familiar with it. So it depends a little bit on your preference, but there's that. All right, and then here's another question. Will learning Greek in our first form series help you learn modern Greek? And here's where that kind of taxonomy of the different epochs of Greek are kind of helpful, because after the Hellenistic period, you have the medieval period, or the Byzantine period of Greek. That Greek is very similar to what is spoken now, but it's still slightly different. And the Hellenistic Greek is actually slightly more removed. So you'll be helped if you want to learn modern Greek in terms of vocab, in terms of the grammar forms of the language, but you probably would be less helped in terms of syntax. With all of that said, I think that starting with the Hellenistic period, starting with Koine Greek or first form and what it focuses on, will definitely equip you if you do want to go on and study modern Greek. All right, our next question. What can students read besides the Bible? And I would just say, if you learn for what's in first form in our form series and what it will be, you'll be equipped to read anything. I say that because I myself was a student. I started as a student with Hellenistic Greek, and then I've kind of backed my way into the classical period and learned with not much difficulty the grammar and the syntax of the classical period. But that was all built upon the foundation that I learned in studying the Hellenistic period, studying Koine Greek. And so after completing our series and what it will be, I think students will be equipped to either read the literature of the Hellenistic period, so the New Testament and those authors, but also be able to go back or forward. All right, our next question. What system of pronunciation do you use? This is a great question. There's really kind of two ways to pronounce Greek that different curriculum decide to use. Or one is the Erasmian pronunciation. This is very similar to probably how they would have pronounced it at the time of that in the Hellenistic period. And then there's the modern pronunciation system. Now, if you come from a Greek Orthodox tradition, in terms of your liturgy, you're probably going to use the modern pronunciation. Whereas if you're just talking to someone about Greek who's maybe not from that tradition, pretty much everywhere else outside of Greece and in that tradition, that religious tradition, you're probably using Erasmian pronunciation. It's far more common. It's actually probably better pedagogically for a new student who's unfamiliar with the language, because in modern Greek, a lot of the vowels and how you pronounce them tend to blend. It's very hard to tell the difference between certain vowel combinations because some of the vowels in modern Greek are all pronounced the same way. Whereas in Erasmian Greek, in that pronunciation system, the system that Erasmus put together, all the vowels are distinct. And so it's helpful for a new student who is trying to attach one sound to one symbol to have one sound to one symbol, whereas modern Greek tends to conflate that. All right, these are great questions. Another frequently asked question, When should a student begin studying Greek? This is kind of a course sequencing question. Usually we'd say in 7th grade. By the time you're in 7th grade, hopefully you've had a little bit of Latin. Hopefully that's kind of set the foundation. It's prepared you for an inflected language where the endings change frequently. It's helped you not to rely too much on word order, but in terms of memorizing the forms of the language. But if you finished 2nd form Latin, maybe depending on your pacing, you might finish 2nd form Latin in 6th grade. As long as you finish 2nd form Latin, then you should be equipped to start 1st form. All right, we'll keep moving through these. What is the suggested progression of MP Greek curriculum? So right now, it's a great question because right now we don't have 2nd form. We're still in 2019. I still have time. The question is, how do we progress after that? Well, in 7th grade, ideally you would start 1st form Greek. After 7th grade, you could then move. What we recommend is Koine's Greek primer, which is a Greek grammar it's geared towards, it's a college level text, but because it's very direct in terms of its grammar instruction and very helpful in terms of its repetition and practice, if you move through it slow enough, it can actually be a very helpful text for someone who is finished with 1st form, ready to get into maybe spending 2 years in Koine. I think there's 32 lessons in there, so you could definitely break that in half over 2 years. And then after that 3rd year, you're ready for a translation course. And then I think there's some other questions that we'll get down here on what text you might read. Another question. Why is our Greek program different or better? One thing that really impressed me about our Greek when I got here was to see how much kind of pedagogy is baked into the program. I mean, there's a teacher manual, there's DVDs, there's a workbook, there's also a very helpful progression as it's laid out. In other words, if you're a parent and you have no knowledge of Greek and you wanted to teach your kids a classical language like Greek, this has all kind of the nuts and bolts of how to do it kind of baked into it, which is extremely helpful if you're, as a parent, coming to this language, or even as a teacher coming to this and saying, I want to teach this, but I just don't know anything. Well, I've not seen another curriculum that at this level has that kind of pedagogy kind of baked into it. All right, looks like there's a question. Allie, over to you.
Would you consider Koine the Henley of Greek?
No, I would not. There's Henley is kind of like from my understanding of Henley, it's kind of like the standard high school, age-appropriate introduction and full grammar. In Greek, there's not really an equivalent. There's just so many elementary Greeks, textbooks that you could use. So it's not quite and it's not even, Henley is geared towards high school students. Koine is really geared towards, a freshman or sophomore in college. So in terms of difficulty, it's definitely more difficult. That's why having a foundation in Latin is maybe the only thing that equips you to be able to jump into something like Koine, just because it can be very difficult. There's not really a good kind of Henley one-for-one at a high school level in Greek. And that's why I think the First Form series, when it's complete, will be just a great addition to the corpus of Greek grammars that we have. But great question. So if you have any more, feel free to comment below. All right, we're nearing the end of our questions here, but a couple more frequently asked questions. When can you expect second form Greek? So I'll skip this one, but briefly I said this year, hopefully. That's our goal. And then another question. What are the best beginner Greek text to translate? So like, for example, we have Caesar for Latin. Well, I think that whenever you're ready for some translation, I think a good place to start is the book of John in the New Testament. Traditionally, it's kind of the simplest Greek in the New Testament. And then you can begin to branch out of the New Testament, maybe jump to the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, or probably don't do Luke, X on Luke. Luke is very difficult. But then also jumping back into the Septuagint, that's good. Xenophon, Plato, the church fathers, all of those can be great. All right, well, that's the end of our episode today. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. In the meantime, keep Greeking, and let us know if we can be of any help to you.